The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Riverside Music Academy, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Lily Chen, a 17-year-old blind pianist from the south side of the city, sat quietly on a bench in the hallway, her slender fingers moving in the air as if playing an invisible keyboard. She'd been doing this since she was a little girl, practicing in her mind when no piano was available. "You nervous?" asked Mrs. Thompson, her music teacher of 12 years, a woman with a kind voice and endless patience. "A little," Lily admitted, adjusting the dark glasses she always wore. "I've never played for someone so famous before." Mrs. Thompson squeezed her shoulder gently. "You've been practicing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 for months. It sounds beautiful, trust me." Lily nodded, but the butterflies in her stomach wouldn't settle. Today wasn't just any day. After years of playing at small community centers and school events, she was finally getting a chance to be heard by someone who mattered in the classical music world. Richard Wells was a legend, a pianist who'd performed with orchestras in London, Vienna, and New York. He'd won 3 Grammy Awards and was known for his flawless technique. But he was also known for something else, his brutal honesty and high standards. Richard didn't sugarcoat his opinions, especially when it came to music. "Do you think he'll like my playing?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Mrs. Thompson could answer, the heavy doors at the end of the hallway swung open. The sound of footsteps, crisp, deliberate, unhurried, echoed through the corridor. Lily sat up straighter, her ears picking up every detail. Expensive leather shoes, the rustle of what was probably a tailored suit, and the faint scent of cedar cologne. "Mr. Wells, thank you so much for making time in your schedule for our students," said a man's voice. Principal Hernandez, who ran the community music program Lily had been part of since she was 5. "I do one of these outreach sessions every year," came the reply, the voice rich and cultured with a slight British accent. "Though I must say I usually visit Juilliard or Curtis. This is my first time at a community program." The way he said community program made it sound like he was talking about a discount store. Lily felt her cheeks grow warm. "We may not be Juilliard," Mrs. Thompson said, stepping forward, "but we have some incredibly talented students. Lily here has been playing since she was 4 years old." There was a pause, and Lily could feel eyes studying her. She resisted the urge to fidget under the scrutiny. "Blind since birth?" Richard asked, not addressing her directly. "Since I was 3, Lily answered before Mrs. Thompson could. "A rare form of retinal cancer." Another pause. "I see. And what will you be playing for us today?" "Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. A short, dismissive laugh escaped him. "That's quite ambitious. Professional pianists struggle with that piece." Lily felt her confidence waver. She'd spent countless hours practicing that piece, falling asleep many nights with the notes still dancing in her head. "Lily has exceptional talent," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "She learned the piece entirely by ear." "By ear?" Richard sounded skeptical. "The ballade has some of the most complex fingering in the romantic repertoire." Principal Hernandez cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should head to the auditorium. The other students are waiting." As they walked, Lily followed the sound of Mrs. Thompson's familiar footsteps, her white cane tapping lightly on the floor. She could sense Richard walking ahead of them, his posture stiff and formal even from behind. The auditorium smelled of lemon polish and old wood. Lily had performed here for small recitals before, so she knew the layout well. 20 rows of seats, a modest stage, and a Yamaha grand piano that was slightly out of tune on the highest octave but had a warm, rich sound in the middle register. She could hear the murmurs of other students already seated, probably about 15 of them, based on the whispers and shuffling. Each was hoping for a chance to impress the famous pianist, maybe even get a recommendation to a prestigious summer program or conservatory. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to have with us today one of the most accomplished classical pianists of our time," Principal Hernandez began. "Mr. Richard Wells has performed with the world's finest orchestras and has graciously agreed to listen to some of our students and offer his professional guidance." Polite applause followed. Lily heard Richard take the stage, his footsteps confident on the wooden boards. "Thank you for that introduction," he said. "I'll be honest. I typically work with students who are already at conservatory level. However, I believe that talent can be found anywhere, so I'm willing to listen. Who would like to go first?" A heavy silence fell over the room. No one wanted to be the first to face his judgment. "I'll go," a boy's voice finally said. Lily recognized it as Thomas, a talented 16-year-old who'd been playing since he was 6. Thomas played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the third movement. It was technically challenging, and he played it well, with only a few minor mistakes. When he finished, there was applause from the students. Richard's feedback was clinical. "Your tempo was inconsistent in the middle section. The arpeggios in measures 47 through 52 were muddy. Your pedaling is too heavy throughout. Work on clarity and precision before adding more expression." Thomas mumbled a thank you, and Lily could hear the disappointment in his voice as he returned to his seat. 3 more students played, and Richard's feedback followed the same pattern, pointing out technical flaws, offering little encouragement, suggesting years more work before they could be considered serious pianists. "Next," Richard said, sounding increasingly bored. "Lily Chen," Mrs. Thompson announced, guiding her to the stage. Lily carefully made her way to the piano, her hand trailing along its curved edge until she found the bench. She sat, adjusted her position, and took a deep breath. "Before you begin," Richard interrupted, "may I ask how you learn your pieces? Do you use Braille sheet music?" "Sometimes," Lily answered. "But for this piece, I mostly learned by listening. My teacher played sections for me and I memorized them. That seems rather limiting," he remarked. "Classical piano requires precision. Every note, every dynamic marking is deliberate." Lily felt a flicker of anger but kept her voice calm. "I understand the piece. I feel it. Feeling is secondary to technique," Richard said dismissively. "But go ahead. Let's hear what you've prepared." Lily positioned her fingers over the keys, finding her starting position. She could feel the smooth ivory beneath her fingertips, cool and familiar. Just as she was about to begin, Richard spoke again. "Actually, you know what? This piece is extremely difficult. Perhaps you should simply enjoy being here today, listen to the other students, and maybe prepare something more suitable for your situation next time. Maybe a simple Mozart sonata?" A hush fell over the auditorium. Lily's hands froze above the keys. "Mr. Wells," Mrs. Thompson began, her voice tight with anger. "Lily has prepared this piece for months. She deserves the chance to—" "I'm trying to save her from embarrassment," Richard cut in. "The ballade requires not only technical skill but an understanding of complex musical structure. Without being able to read the score, I'd like to play," Lily said quietly but firmly. Richard sighed. "Very well, but don't be discouraged when—" "Please," Lily interrupted, something she rarely did. "Just let me play." Another sigh. "Go ahead then. Enjoy the experience at least." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. He didn't expect anything worthwhile. To him, this was charity, listening to a blind girl fumble through a piece far beyond her abilities. Lily took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The room disappeared. The judgmental pianist, her worried teacher, the other students, all faded away. It was just her and the piano now. Her fingers touched the keys, and the opening G minor chord of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 filled the auditorium. The beginning was deceptively simple, a slow, questioning melody that soon gave way to faster, more complex passages. Lily's fingers moved with certainty, finding each note without hesitation. The piece told a story, one of longing, passion, conflict, and resolution, and Lily was its storyteller. As she played, she forgot about proving herself to Richard Wells. She forgot about her nervousness. She forgot about everything except the music flowing through her. Her small body swayed slightly with the changing moods of the piece, her face reflecting the emotions in the music, now thoughtful, now intense, now peaceful. When she reached the technically demanding coda, a section that required incredible speed and precision, she didn't slow down or simplify. Her fingers flew across the keys in perfect execution of the cascading notes. The final chords resonated through the room, powerful and definitive. Then silence. For several seconds, no one made a sound. Lily sat still at the piano, her hands resting in her lap, waiting. Finally, she heard it. First one person clapping, then another, until the whole room erupted in applause. Someone whistled. Someone else shouted, "Bravo." But Lily was listening for one reaction in particular. From the spot where Richard Wells had been standing, there was nothing. Complete silence. Then she heard his footsteps approaching the piano. Slow, measured steps. He stopped beside her. "Who taught you to play like that?" he asked, his voice different now, quieter, with something like wonder in it. Lily smiled slightly. Music taught me. I just listened. For once, the great Richard Wells seemed to have nothing to say, and in that moment of stunned silence, Lily knew that everything was about to change. The master class continued for another hour after Lily's performance. But something fundamental had changed in the auditorium. Richard Wells, who had arrived with barely disguised indifference, now sat forward in his chair, listening intently to each student. Though his comments remained precise and technical, the dismissive edge had vanished from his voice. Lily sat quietly in the front row, her cane resting against her leg, taking in everything. She could sense the shift in the room, the way the other students played with more confidence now, inspired by what they'd witnessed. Mrs. Thompson sat beside her, occasionally squeezing her hand in silent celebration. When Principal Hernandez finally announced the end of the session, students gathered around Richard asking questions about music schools and practice techniques. Lily remained in her seat, content to wait for the crowd to thin before finding her way out. "You must be hungry after all that," Mrs. Thompson said. "I need to speak with Principal Hernandez about next month's recital. Will you be okay waiting here for a few minutes? Your mom texted that she's running late. Traffic on the bridge." "I'll be fine," Lily assured her. "Maybe I can practice a bit more if no one's using the piano." After Mrs. Thompson left, Lily listened to the sounds of the auditorium gradually emptying. Footsteps receded, voices faded, doors opened and closed. She waited until the room fell quiet, then carefully made her way to the stage, feeling along the edge until she found the steps. The piano bench creaked slightly as she sat down. Lily ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, reacquainting herself with their smooth, cool surface. This piano was older than the one she had at home, with keys that had been worn smooth by thousands of hands over the years. She began to play softly at first, not Chopin this time, but Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. It was a piece she'd been working on secretly for months, listening to recordings late at night with her headphones on, figuring out the complex fingerings through trial and error. She hadn't told Mrs. Thompson yet. It was considered one of the most technically demanding concertos ever written, and she wanted to surprise her teacher when she'd mastered it completely. The opening theme was deceptively simple, a quiet, melancholic melody that soon gave way to increasingly complex variations. Lily's fingers found their way through the intricate patterns, her body swaying slightly as the music built in intensity. There was no sheet music, no teacher guiding her, just the notes she'd carefully memorized and the emotions they stirred in her. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the auditorium door open, didn't notice the footsteps that stopped abruptly at the back of the room. Richard Wells had returned for his forgotten briefcase. He'd been halfway to his car when he realized he'd left it beside the chair where he'd been sitting. Annoyed at the delay, he'd hurried back to the auditorium, expecting to find it empty. Instead, he found himself frozen in place, listening to a young blind girl playing one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire, not just playing it, but interpreting it with a depth of feeling that left him speechless. Richard had performed this concerto with orchestras around the world. He knew every twist and turn of the score, every technical challenge. He'd spent years perfecting his interpretation. Yet here was this teenager playing without sheet music, without formal conservatory training, capturing something in the music that had always eluded him, a raw emotional truth that technique alone couldn't achieve. Lily reached a particularly demanding passage, a series of cascading arpeggios that required both speed and precision. Her small hand stretched impossibly across the octaves, never faltering, never hesitating. But it wasn't just the technical mastery that held Richard spellbound. It was the way she shaped each phrase as if having a conversation with the composer himself. He found himself holding his breath, afraid that any sound might break the spell. He'd been teaching and performing for over 30 years, had heard countless prodigies and virtuosos, but never had he encountered talent quite like this. Talent in its purest form, untouched by ego or ambition. When Lily finally finished the movement, the last notes hanging in the air like a question left unanswered, Richard couldn't stop himself from applauding. Lily's head jerked up in surprise. "Who's there?" She called out, her hands quickly withdrawing from the keys. "It's Richard Wells," he answered, walking slowly down the aisle toward the stage. "I forgot my briefcase." "Oh," Lily said, her cheeks flushing. I didn't realize anyone was listening. Richard climbed the steps to the stage, studying her with new eyes. Earlier, he'd barely looked at her, seeing only a blind girl from a community music program, someone to be patronized rather than taken seriously. Now he couldn't look away. "How long have you been working on the Rachmaninoff?" he asked, sitting down on a chair near the piano. Lily's fingers nervously traced the edge of the keyboard. "About 6 months. I haven't told my teacher yet." 6 months, Richard repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. "Most pianists spend years on that concerto." Was it okay?" Lily asked hesitantly. Richard laughed, not the dismissive laugh from earlier, but a genuine one filled with wonder. "Okay, it was extraordinary. Your left-hand work in particular. The way you voiced those inner melodies." He stopped, realizing she was tense, waiting for criticism. "You have a gift, Lily, a rare one." She relaxed slightly, a small smile forming. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." "I owe you an apology," Richard said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. He rarely apologized for anything. "I made assumptions about you, about your abilities. I was wrong." Lily tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "People usually do. It's okay." "No, it's not okay," Richard insisted. "I, of all people, should know better than to judge a musician before hearing them play." He paused. "May I ask, how do you do it? Learn such complex pieces without seeing the music?" Lily's fingers began to move slightly as if playing invisible notes. "I have a good memory for sound. Once I hear something, I can usually play it back. For more complicated pieces, I break them down into sections and learn each part separately. But the fingering, the technique, I feel my way through it," she explained. "If something doesn't sound right, I try different fingerings until it works. Mrs. Thompson helps sometimes, but mostly I figure it out on my own." Richard shook his head, amazed. "In some ways, perhaps not seeing the music is an advantage. You're not bound by someone else's interpretation, the markings on a page." "Maybe," Lily agreed. "But I do wonder sometimes what I'm missing." "Less than you might think," Richard said. "Many pianists become so focused on following the score exactly that they forget to listen, really listen, to what they're playing." A comfortable silence fell between them. Outside, rain had started to fall, creating a gentle backdrop of sound. "When did you first start playing?" Richard asked finally. "When I was 4, Lily said. After I lost my sight, my parents were desperate to find something I could do that didn't require vision. My dad bought an old upright piano from a neighbor and I just connected with it right away." "And you've had formal lessons all this time?" "With Mrs. Thompson, yes. She's wonderful, but..." Lily hesitated. "But what?" "She's worried that she can't teach me everything I need to know. She's been trying to help me get into a proper conservatory program, but no one seems interested in taking on a blind student." Lily said this matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Richard felt a twinge of shame, knowing he would have had the same reaction just hours ago. "Their loss," he said simply. Just then, the auditorium door opened and Mrs. Thompson's voice called out, "Lily, your mother's here." "Coming," Lily answered, standing up and reaching for her cane. Richard stood as well. "Lily, wait." He hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even himself. "I'm giving a recital at Carnegie Hall next month. Would you like to come? As my guest?" Lily's face lit up. "Carnegie Hall? Really? Really? And perhaps afterward we could talk more about your future as a pianist." Mrs. Thompson had reached the stage by then, looking curiously between them. "Mr. Wells has invited me to his concert at Carnegie Hall," Lily told her, barely containing her excitement. Mrs. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. That's wonderful." Richard took a business card from his pocket and handed it to Mrs. Thompson. "My private number. Call my assistant to arrange everything." He turned back to Lily. "And perhaps you could prepare a piece to play for me after the concert? Something of your choice." Lily nodded, her smile radiant. "I'd like that very much." As he watched Mrs. Thompson guide Lily from the stage, Richard picked up his forgotten briefcase, feeling strangely lighthearted. For years, music had become routine for him. Performances, recordings, teaching. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost the sense of wonder that had first drawn him to the piano as a child. Today, in this modest auditorium in a community music school, a blind girl had reminded him what music was truly about. Not perfect technique or prestigious venues, but something much more profound. The ability to speak directly to the human heart. Richard left the auditorium with Rachmaninoff's melodies still echoing in his mind, and a new sense of purpose in his step. He had a feeling this was just the beginning of an extraordinary journey. For Lily, certainly, but perhaps even more so for himself. The next few weeks passed, in a blur for Lily. Word had spread quickly through the Riverside Music Academy about her performance and Richard Wells' unexpected interest in her playing. Students who had barely noticed her before now stopped her in the hallways to chat. Teachers who had once been kind but distant now offered to help her practice during their free periods. Lily found the sudden attention both flattering and overwhelming. For years she had existed in a world defined by sound rather than sight, the tap of her cane on the sidewalk, the rumble of subway trains beneath her feet, and most importantly, the endless universe of music that lived in her mind and at her fingertips. Now she had to navigate a new kind of attention that she couldn't see but could certainly feel. "They're just impressed," her mother told her one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, the smell of ginger and garlic from dinner still hanging in the air. "You showed everyone what you can do." "I wasn't trying to show anyone anything," Lily said quietly, running her fingers over the raised dots of her Braille music book. "I was just playing." Her mother's hand covered hers, warm and familiar. "That's why it was so powerful, sweetheart. You play from your heart, not for applause." The following Saturday, Lily sat in her usual practice room at the academy, working through a difficult passage of the Rachmaninoff concerto. The room was small but had excellent acoustics, her favorite place to practice because of how the sound seemed to wrap around her like a blanket. A knock at the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called, turning toward the sound. "Sorry to disturb you," came Mrs. Thompson's voice, "but you have a visitor." Before Lily could ask who it was, she recognized the now familiar footsteps and the faint scent of cedar cologne. "Mr. Wells," she said, surprised. "Please call me Richard," he said, his voice closer now. She heard the soft scrape of a chair being pulled up near the piano. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "No, just practicing," Lily said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I didn't expect to see you until the concert next week." "That's actually why I'm here," Richard said. There was something different in his voice, a touch of hesitation that hadn't been there before. "I've had an idea, but I wanted to discuss it with you in person." Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. "I'll leave you two to talk. Lily, I'll be in the office if you need me." When the door closed, Richard continued, "I've been thinking about your playing, specifically the Rachmaninoff. It's truly exceptional." "Thank you," Lily said, a small smile forming on her lips. Compliments from Richard Wells were still new enough to feel special. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "The director of the Philharmonic owed me a favor, and well, how would you feel about playing the first movement of the Rachmaninoff at my Carnegie Hall concert? Not as an audience member, but as a featured performer?" Lily's hands froze over the keys. "Carnegie Hall?" she whispered. "Me?" "Yes, you," Richard confirmed, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "The program already includes Rachmaninoff's third concerto with me as soloist. But I've suggested opening with the first movement performed by a remarkable young talent I recently discovered." Lily's heart raced. Carnegie Hall was the dream of every pianist, the pinnacle, the holy grail. And here was Richard Wells offering her the chance to play there just like that. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," Richard urged. "You're ready, Lily, more than ready." 1,000 thoughts rushed through her mind, excitement, fear, disbelief. "But what about the orchestra? I've never played with an orchestra before." "We'll have 2 rehearsals next week," Richard explained. "It's not as much preparation time as I'd like, but with your ear and memory I think you'll adapt quickly." Lily took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked finally, the question that had been nagging at her since that day in the auditorium. Richard was quiet for a moment. "When I first came to your school I was going through the motions," he admitted. "I've been playing professionally for 30 years. Somewhere along the way I stopped feeling the music and started just performing it. Perfectly, technically, but..." He paused. "When I heard you play, it reminded me why I fell in love with the piano in the first place." Lily listened intently, surprised by his honesty. "I've been teaching at the conservatory for 15 years, Richard continued. "I've worked with incredibly talented students with perfect technique, students who can sight read anything you put in front of them. But I've never encountered anyone who plays with your soul." My soul? Lily repeated. Yes, Richard said simply. Most pianists play the notes. Some play the music. But you play what's behind the music, what the composer was feeling when they wrote it. That's extremely rare, Lily, and it can't be taught. Lily felt a lump forming in her throat. My dad used to say music was the way I could see the world. Your father is a wise man, Richard said. So, will you do it? Will you play Carnegie Hall with me? Lily's face broke into a wide smile. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. The days leading up to the concert were a whirlwind of preparation. Richard arranged for Lily to rehearse with a piano tutor, who specialized in preparing soloists for orchestral performances. They worked on cues, timing, and the subtle adjustments needed when playing with dozens of other musicians rather than alone. The first rehearsal with the full orchestra was overwhelming. Lily had never been surrounded by so many instruments at once, never had to find her way through such a complex tapestry of sound. There were moments of confusion, moments when she lost her place, moments when the sheer volume of the orchestra seemed to swallow her playing whole. It's too much, she whispered to Richard during a break, her hands trembling slightly. I can't do this. You can, Richard insisted gently. You're just not used to it. By the second rehearsal, your ear will have adjusted. Trust me, and he was right. During the second rehearsal, something clicked. Lily began to hear the orchestra, not as a wall of competing sounds, but as a conversation. Different voices speaking to each other, responding, supporting. Her piano part was just one voice in that conversation, sometimes leading, sometimes following. By the end of the rehearsal, even the orchestra conductor was impressed. Remarkable adaptation, he told Richard while Lily was gathering her things. She listens better than most sighted musicians I've worked with. The night of the concert arrived and Lily sat backstage in a small dressing room, her fingers moving restlessly in her lap. She wore a simple blue dress that her mother had chosen, her dark hair pulled back with a silver clip. Her stomach was a knot of nerves. A knock at the door and Mrs. Thompson entered. You look beautiful, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you, Lily. I'm scared, Lily admitted. What if I forget something? What if I make a mistake in front of all those people? Mrs. Thompson sat beside her, taking her hands. Do you remember what you told me after your very first recital? You were 7 years old and you just played a simple Mozart piece. Lily shook her head. You said, when I play, it's just me and the piano. Nothing else matters. That's still true. Lily, the size of the audience doesn't change the conversation between you and the music. Another knock, and Richard's voice called, 5 minutes. Lily. As Mrs. Thompson helped her to her feet, Lily felt a strange calm settling over her. This was it, the moment that would change everything. But in the end, it was still just her and the piano. Richard was waiting in the wings. Ready? He asked. Ready, Lily confirmed. He took her arm gently, guiding her toward the stage. Lily, he said softly, stopping just before they reached the curtain. I need to say something before you go out there. What is it? She asked, hearing the unusual solemnity in his voice. That first day at your school, I was dismissive, arrogant. I told you to just enjoy the experience as if you couldn't possibly contribute anything of value. His voice was thick with regret. It was the kind of thoughtless comment I've probably made 1,000 times to 1,000 students. But watching you now preparing to play one of the most difficult piano concertos ever written, at Carnegie Hall, he took a deep breath. I want you to know that I was wrong, profoundly wrong, and I'm deeply sorry. Lily reached out, finding his hand and squeezing it lightly. Thank you for saying that, she said. But you know what? In a strange way, I'm glad it happened that way. If you hadn't underestimated me, we might not be standing here now. Richard laughed softly. Wisdom from a 17-year-old. Will wonders never cease? The orchestra finished tuning and a hush fell over the hall. That's your cue, Richard whispered. Go show them what music really means. With her head held high, Lily Chen stepped onto the stage of Carnegie Hall, ready to let her fingers tell a story that her eyes had never seen, but her heart understood perfectly. The applause was deafening. Lily stood center stage, her hand still resting on the final chord of Rachmaninoff's concerto. She had never heard anything like it, the sound of 2,000 people on their feet, clapping, cheering, some even shouting, "Bravo!" The sound waves hit her like a physical force, wrapping around her, lifting her up. The conductor took her hand, guiding her to the front of the stage for a bow. Then he stepped back, leaving her alone in the spotlight she couldn't see. This moment, this thunder of appreciation, was all for her. She bowed once, then again, smiling in the direction of the sound. Someone handed her flowers. Roses, she could tell from their scent. The applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. From the wings, Richard watched with a mixture of pride and wonder. He had performed on this same stage dozens of times, had received standing ovations from audiences around the world. But watching Lily, this 17-year-old girl who had never had a proper lesson at a conservatory, who had learned one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire largely by ear, he felt something entirely new. Something that went beyond pride or admiration. He felt humbled. When Lily finally left the stage, her face was flushed with excitement. "They loved you," Richard said, handing her a bottle of water. "It was so loud," she laughed, still breathless. "I've never heard anything like it." "Get used to it," he said, smiling. "That's the sound of a career being born." In the green room after the concert, Lily was surrounded by well-wishers, orchestra members, music critics, representatives from record labels. Richard stayed close by, making introductions, explaining that yes, she was only 17 and no, she had never attended a conservatory. "But she will," he added, catching Lily's attention. "We're still deciding which one." Later, when the crowd had thinned and Lily sat with her parents and Mrs. Thompson, Richard pulled up a chair. "I meant what I said earlier," he told them. "Lily needs proper training now. Her talent is extraordinary, but there are still technical aspects of playing that she should learn, repertoire she should explore. We've tried conservatories before," Lily's father said, his voice tinged with old frustration. "They all said the same thing. They didn't have programs for blind students. They couldn't adapt their teaching methods. They didn't have the resources." "They'll change their tune now," Richard assured him. "After tonight, every music school in the country will be fighting to have Lily as a student. What would you recommend?" Mrs. Thompson asked. She had been Lily's teacher for so long, guiding her as far as she could. Now she understood. Lily needed to go beyond what she could offer. Richard looked thoughtful. "There are several excellent options. Juilliard, of course, Curtis in Philadelphia, Eastman in Rochester." He paused. "But I have another idea, if Lily is open to it." All eyes turned to him. "I've been teaching master classes at various conservatories for years," he explained. "But I've never taken on a private student, someone I would work with one-on-one outside the regular conservatory structure." He looked at Lily. "Until now." Lily's mouth fell open slightly. "You want to teach me? Personally?" "I do," Richard confirmed. "You could still attend a conservatory for theory classes, music history, and so on. But for your piano studies, I would work with you directly." Lily's parents exchanged glances. "That's a very generous offer," her mother said carefully. "But we could never afford—" Richard held up a hand. "There would be no fee. In fact," he hesitated, then continued, "I've spoken with my foundation. We'd like to offer Lily a full scholarship to cover her education expenses, plus a stipend for living costs if she decides to relocate for school." The room fell silent. Lily's father cleared his throat, clearly emotional. "Why would you do this for her?" Richard looked at Lily, who sat perfectly still, taking it all in. "Because she's already taught me more than I could ever teach her," he said simply. "And because the world needs to hear what she can do." 3 months later, Lily sat at the grand piano in Richard's home studio in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, filling the room with soft afternoon light. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with scores, records, and books on music theory and history. It was a pianist's sanctuary. "Let's try that passage again," Richard said, standing beside the piano. "The third movement measures 94 through 106. Lily nodded, positioning her hands. She was working on Bach's Italian Concerto now, a piece that required a different kind of precision than the romantic composers she was more familiar with. "Remember, Bach isn't about emotional swells like Rachmaninoff," Richard reminded her. "It's about clarity, counterpoint, the perfect balance between voices." Lily played the passage, her fingers dancing across the keys with growing confidence. Since beginning her studies with Richard, her technique had improved dramatically. She was learning to use her hands more efficiently, to create different tones through touch alone, to navigate complex key changes with greater ease. Better, Richard said when she finished. Much better. You're starting to feel the architecture of it. Lily smiled. Working with Richard was intense but rewarding. He pushed her harder than anyone ever had, expecting perfection but also teaching her how to achieve it. Unlike her early teachers, who had sometimes been overly gentle with her because of her blindness, Richard treated her exactly as he would any gifted student, with high expectations and unwavering belief in her ability to meet them. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said, her fingers still resting on the keys. "Of course. When did you know that you wanted to be a pianist, I mean?" Richard was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I was about 9, he said finally. My mother took me to hear Vladimir Horowitz play at Carnegie Hall. It was near the end of his life, one of his last performances. I remember sitting in that hall, listening to this old man with arthritic hands somehow create the most perfect, transcendent music I'd ever heard." He paused. "I didn't just want to play the piano after that. I needed to." Lily nodded, understanding completely. "For me, it was never really a choice. After I lost my sight, music became my way of seeing. Each composer shows me a different world." "What does Bach's world look like to you?" Richard asked curiously. Lily thought for a moment. "Perfectly ordered. Mathematical but not cold. Like a garden where every plant has its exact right place, but it's still bursting with life." She smiled. "Rachmaninoff is different. Stormy seas and vast Russian landscapes. Chopin feels like heartbreak and hope all mixed together." Richard shook his head in wonder. "You know, I've been playing these composers for decades, but I've never thought of them quite that way." He sat down on the bench beside her. "I think that's why we make a good team. You hear the soul of the music instinctively. I can help with the technical framework to express it fully." Over the next several months, Lily's progress was remarkable. She divided her time between private lessons with Richard and classes at the conservatory, where she studied music theory, composition, and history. Word of her talent spread quickly through the classical music world, fueled by videos of her Carnegie Hall performance that had gone viral online. Invitations began to arrive, to play with orchestras in Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles. Richard helped her select which opportunities to accept, which pieces to perform, how to pace herself so she wouldn't burn out. "Your career is a marathon, not a sprint," he told her. "Too many young prodigies flame out because they take on too much. Too soon." On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Lily arrived at Richard's studio to find him in an unusually excited mood. "I've got news," he said as soon as she walked in. "The New York Philharmonic is planning a special concert series next season, Rising Stars, featuring exceptional young talent. They want you as their headline performer." Lily set down her bag, taking in this information. "What would I play?" "That's the best part," Richard said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "They want you to perform the complete Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 3, all 3 movements." The piece that started this whole journey. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had been working on the complete concerto for months now, mastering the second and third movements with Richard's guidance. But to perform it with the New York Philharmonic, one of the world's greatest orchestras, was beyond her wildest dreams. "Do you think I'm ready?" she asked, a touch of her old uncertainty creeping into her voice. Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "More than ready. In fact, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Later that evening, as Lily practiced the concerto's challenging third movement, Richard sat quietly, listening. He had canceled a performance in Vienna to be here for this, to help Lily prepare for what would surely be a defining moment in her young career. His agent had been furious, his manager baffled. Richard Wells didn't cancel performances, ever. But watching Lily now, lost in the music, her face reflecting every emotion in the score, Richard knew he had made the right choice. His own playing had transformed in these months of teaching her, become more authentic, more connected to the emotional core of the music. Colleagues had noticed, critics had written about it. "You seem different," a fellow pianist had told him after a recent recital, "like you've fallen in love with music all over again." And it was true. Through Lily's ears, Richard had learned to hear music anew, not as a technical challenge to be conquered, but as a living, breathing language of the soul. As the final notes of Rachmaninoff faded away, Lily turned toward him. "How was that?" she asked. Richard smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." 1 year had passed since Lily first played Carnegie Hall. 1 year of intensive training with Richard, of theory classes at the conservatory, of carefully selected performances around the country. 1 year of growth, challenges, and transformation. Now she stood backstage at Lincoln Center listening to the sounds of the New York Philharmonic warming up. Tonight was the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Her debut as the featured soloist in the Rising Stars concert series, performing the complete Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 3. "Nervous?" Richard asked, appearing at her side. Lily shook her head, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Not really, more ready." Richard smiled. He'd watched her preparation for this night with growing admiration. Where once she had relied primarily on intuition and natural talent, she now combined those gifts with rigorous technique and deeper understanding of the music's structure. She had become not just a prodigy, but a true artist. "Your parents are in the front row," he told her, along with Mrs. Thompson and half the students from Riverside Music Academy. Lily grinned. Did they like the surprise? The free tickets? They were thrilled. Your father couldn't stop thanking me. It had been Lily's idea to reserve a block of seats for students from her old school, particularly those who couldn't afford to attend such a prestigious concert. Richard had not only arranged it, but had organized transportation as well, sending buses to bring them all to Lincoln Center. 5 minutes. "Miss Chen," the stage manager called. Lily took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of her gown, a deep blue silk that her mother had described as the color of twilight. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot, a few strands framing her face. "Richard," she said quietly, "whatever happens tonight, I want you to know how grateful I am. For everything." Richard squeezed her hand. "Save the speeches for after your standing ovation," he said lightly, but she could hear the emotion in his voice. "Will you be watching from the wings?" she asked. "Actually, I'll be in the audience tonight," he replied. "Front row beside your parents. I want to experience this the way everyone else will." The thought of Richard sitting with her family, not as her teacher but as someone who believed in her, filled Lily with warmth. "It's time," the stage manager said, returning to guide her to the stage entrance. Lily picked up her cane, though she wouldn't need it on stage. The conductor would escort her to the piano as they had practiced in rehearsals. "Lily," Richard called after her, "remember what we talked about? This piece tells a story." "Your story?" She nodded, understanding perfectly. In the past year, the Rachmaninoff Concerto had become more than just a piece of music to her. It had become the soundtrack to her own journey, from a talented but overlooked girl to a pianist on the cusp of a major career. The applause began as soon as she stepped onto the stage, guided by the conductor. She could feel the energy of the audience, nearly 3,000 people filling the grand space of David Geffen Hall. Lily smiled in their direction, then allowed herself to be led to the gleaming Steinway at center stage. She adjusted the bench, took a moment to feel the cool ivory keys beneath her fingertips, and nodded to the conductor. The orchestra began the opening theme, that deceptively simple melody that had first captured her imagination all those months ago in the empty auditorium at Riverside Music Academy. When Lily joined in, matching the theme with her right hand, a hush fell over the hall. Even those who had seen videos of her playing were unprepared for the experience of hearing her live. The way she seemed to become one with the piano, the way each note seemed to emerge not just from the instrument but from somewhere deep within her. The first movement flowed with a sense of questioning, of searching. Lily's small hands stretched to accommodate Rachmaninoff's challenging chords and rapid passages, never faltering, never hesitating. She and the orchestra moved together like dance partners who had been performing together for years. In the slower second movement, Lily brought out inner voices in the music that even seasoned pianists often missed, subtle melodies hidden beneath the more obvious themes. The hall was so quiet during the delicate passages that you could hear the gentle rain that had begun to fall outside, pattering against the high windows. And then came the third movement, a whirlwind of technical challenges and emotional peaks. Lily's fingers flew across the keyboard at incredible speed, yet each note rang clear and purposeful. There was no showing off, no empty virtuosity, only the music, speaking directly to every heart in the room. As she approached the final section of the concerto, Lily felt herself entering that rare state where conscious thought falls away. She was no longer playing the piano. She was simply the vessel through which Rachmaninoff's music could live and breathe once more. The final chords resounded through the hall, triumphant, resolute, complete. For a moment there was perfect silence. Then the audience erupted in applause so thunderous it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. People were on their feet before the last note had fully faded, cheering, some even shouting, "Brava!" Through tears, the conductor took Lily's hand, guiding her to the front of the stage for a bow. The applause intensified. Someone handed her flowers and she cradled them in one arm while waving with her free hand. After 3 curtain calls, Lily was escorted backstage, where her parents waited with tears streaming down their faces. "My girl," her father whispered, hugging her tightly. "My incredible girl." Her mother couldn't speak at all, just held her close, shoulders shaking with silent sobs of pride and joy. Mrs. Thompson was next, embracing her former student. "I always knew," she said simply. "From the very first day I knew you were special." A group of students from Riverside approached shyly, asking for autographs, telling her how she had inspired them to practice harder, to believe in themselves. Through it all, Lily kept looking for Richard. He had been her guide on this journey, the one who had seen her true potential when others had dismissed her. She found him standing quietly at the back of the green room, watching the scene with a gentle smile. "There you are," Lily said, making her way toward him through the crowd. "What did you think?" Richard took both her hands in his. "I think," he said slowly, "that was the finest performance of Rachmaninoff's Third I have ever heard. And I've heard them all." Coming from Richard Wells with his exacting standards and decades of experience, this was no small compliment. "Really?" Lily asked, a hint of her old uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Really," he confirmed. "You found things in that music that I've never heard before. Connections between phrases, emotional subtleties that most pianists miss completely." Lily smiled, squeezing his hands. "I had a good teacher." "You had a good teacher who had the wisdom to let you show him new ways of hearing," Richard corrected. "That's the thing about music, Lily, it's never finished. There's always something new to discover, even in pieces that have been played for 100 years. The backstage area was becoming crowded now with well-wishers, critics, representatives from record labels, directors of concert halls from around the world, all wanting to meet the young blind pianist who had brought fresh life to Rachmaninoff. Ms. Chen, a distinguished-looking man in a dark suit, approached. "Benjamin Harper from Universal Music. We'd be very interested in discussing a recording contract with you." Before Lily could respond, another person stepped forward. "Alexandra Petrovna from the Moscow Conservatory. We would be honored to have you perform in our Young Virtuoso series next season." The offers continued. Concerts, recordings, interviews, even a documentary. Richard stayed close by, helping Lily navigate the flood of opportunities, making sure she wasn't overwhelmed. Later that night, when the crowds had finally dispersed, Lily and Richard sat alone in the now empty green room. The excitement of the evening had left them both drained but content. "What happens now?" Lily asked softly, running her fingers along the edge of her flowers. Richard considered the question. "Now you have choices. More choices than most musicians ever get. You can record, you can tour, you can focus on certain composers or periods." He paused. "The world is open to you now, Lily." "Because I can play the piano well," she mused. "No," Richard corrected gently. "Because you showed everyone that limitations only exist if we accept them. Your blindness wasn't an obstacle to becoming a great pianist. In some ways, it may even have been your strength." Lily nodded slowly. "I hear things differently. I always have. And now the world is hearing them too," Richard said. "That standing ovation tonight wasn't just for your playing. It was for your courage, your perseverance, your willingness to share your unique way of experiencing music." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the cleaning crew working in the concert hall. "Remember that first day?" Lily asked finally. "When you told me to just enjoy the master class?" Richard groaned. "Not my finest moment.